tracking data. This is a good topic. So it's funny that you guys that you brought that up, Tony, because like yesterday I follow Aura Ring. And Aura Ring is like the ring that I have it. And I've had it for even before I had a Whoop. It tracks things like sleep and everything, but I follow him on Instagram. And yesterday, I think 2 days ago, I don't know if this is a planned thing that they did, but or like an actual paid thing. I think it's likely not the case, but maybe it is. Kim Kardashian actually wears one, and she posted like this like sleep tracking data, and then for her it was like 99% sleep efficiency, a bunch of stuff like that. And it's like, oh, I use like Aura Ring to track my stuff. And then Aura like just reposted the Instagram, like, story and literally Aura Ring, like as an account said, fangirl mom moment. And like, so either they did like a really good marketing campaign where they just made it super organic, or literally Kim Kardashian just decided to up and go and just simply say like, hey, I actually got this and I really want to talk about it without actually having to get paid for it. I don't know if you guys knew, but like, I think like one of the Kardashians, I think her, I think like the Kylie, like the younger sister, she charges, I think closer to like 500K for one post on her Instagram. So, I mean, something ridiculous. Don't quote me on that. It could be like probably like, but it's in like the six figures just for one post. Right. Yeah. So I was like thinking either they do a really good campaign to make it seem like super stupid organic, or genuinely Kim Kardashian is using wearable tech or a trackable, like, like sleep tracking data. And she just wanted to share it out of the blue. So now Gwyneth Paltrow went in and actually talked about her what's the called thing. And now they're turning it into this like challenge. Now a bunch of people are posting, like they started gaining a bunch of followers. It may be kind of like a campaign or whatever they may be using. But the truth is that it definitely was like it blew up, honestly. So I'm sure their sales are probably skyrocketing right now, whether it was intended to or not. So who knows? This is like a $250 thing. So, but anyways,
I remember you telling us on, I think one of the ones we spoke about is that you don't like it because you used to wear it.
That's my problem.
To CrossFit, and it would not either get scratched. So you'd have to wear tape around it. So that's why I've never invested in one, because I want to use it for the best that I can.
Yeah, I mean, if you see, I don't know if it could, I don't know if it's gonna like, yeah. So yeah, I can't really see it, but it's like it's all scratched up. Like, yeah, it's all scratched up. But yeah, so it has like obviously like the sensors and everything. What I like about this is like it actually tracks steps. So, and that's what the only thing I don't like about Whoop, which I don't understand exactly why they haven't been able to update that to actually just do like a step tracker. But this tracks steps. And it also tracks body temperature, or like kind of like adjustments around that. So that's why I like to use it. The problem is like I said, I had to take it off every single time that I train, because I sometimes would put tape around it, but it was just so uncomfortable that I didn't like wearing it. So I think Whoop is definitely going to be hands down. I mean, I've been wearing Whoop for closer to a year now. And I don't have any complaints, honestly. It gives me really interesting information.
I'm all about the data. Because I never got an Aura Ring, but I use, I'm sure I've talked about it on this pod, but the Sleep Cycle app. And it's not a perfect tech, but for me, what it helps is like it takes some of your data and provides you with qualitative scores. So like the first two that I focus in on is regularity and then sleep quality, because it's tracking some of your activity throughout the day. How much caffeine did you have today? Did you drink alcohol? Like, did you get some sunlight today? So it tracks all of those behaviors.
Did you get something today?
Yeah, some. Yeah. Did you get some type of thing? And then it'll take the time that you go to bed, and then it will register sound, snoring, movement, breathing. And then it'll also take the score when you wake up, and it provides you with that qualitative score. So I tend to find like just helping people with regularity of like going to bed at a certain time, waking up at the same time. It's so damn beneficial. So I'm all about the data. And TC, to answer your question, I stopped using it because I started just spending so much time on the data, and I was like, all right, I got shit to do.
but I think
I know, Andres, you love that.
Well, yes, but at the same time, and this is what I tell people that kind of wear, like whether it's like a Whoop or any kind of like wearable technology, which is do not be driven by it. Like, do not be like, just use it as an awareness tool. And that's exactly what I did. Now, like the best example, I was just like talking to Dezi before you joined in, Tony, that the fact that I woke up this morning at 3 a.m. and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I just got up and went. In the past, like I would have been obsessed about the fact that my Whoop would be like registering like a 40% sleep, like, kind of like need that was obviously met. And that would affect my recovery. So I would try to fight the moment that I would be like, try to like, going back to sleep and try to do everything I can. And that kind of messed me up a little bit because I would just end up falling asleep like 3 hours after being rolling around and like in the couch or in bed or whatever. And then I would sleep until like 8, wake up straight into work. And it was just kind of like messing me up. So today I was like, you know what? Whatever. I'm just going to wake up. I'm gonna like, I'm active. My brain is like moving, it's going. Yeah, it registered I have 40% sleep, but I'm not kind of like making a deal of it. So I think I just usually pay attention to the trends that it's kind of like giving me in terms of recovery. I just feel it's a technology that gets it's improving over time. And it's not, the thing is like, it's not accurate. I think a lot of people typically kind of get very
they lose themselves in
the whole calorie thing. But I will say this though, I have paid attention to my own trends, looking at calorie expenditure estimates that this thing typically kind of gives you. And I compare it to obviously my progression with, let's say, for example, when I'm taking like a couple, like I think usually like towards the end of July, beginning of August, I decided to kind of like do a little more of like, little mini fat loss like stage. And I started doing a few different things differently. And consistency was a big thing for the weekend. And I added a few Peloton rides in the morning on top of CrossFit. I just kind of like started like, accommodating different things. And I started to pay attention to like my average calorie expenditure compared to obviously what I was taking in. And I looked at obviously my weight progression, and it was actually matching. So I was actually creating a pretty consistent 400-500 calorie deficit. And it showed obviously in my weight and my body composition. So I would say that it's actually not as inaccurate as most people may think it is. I think the accuracy data from heart rate estimations on how many calories you burn on a daily basis, I think there's like a plus minus 20% margin of error.
It's higher, right?
It's higher.
What is it?
All right. So it ranges. It's from 20% off to 91% off.
Depending on
what device you use. So it could be Oura, could be Fitbit, could be Apple Watch, could be Whoop. They went through a whole gamut. Garmin is another one, right?
I thought it was 25 to 50. It's 91.
So
one of them was off by 91%. I don't remember.
I mean, if it's the shitty ones, probably.
So 91% like above, like, or it can be below. I mean, if it's like a 91%, like under. I mean, like. When I think, let's say if it shows like, like, I don't know, like 2,000 calories, that literally would mean like 200 calories, like that is kind of like registering as a calorie expenditure. Yeah. Sounds like, well, I would look at that and be like, well, that's crazy.
You can get the ones on Amazon that do that. All right. So now that we're talking this out, that kind of makes sense. Cause I have seen, I don't know how you guys sort of rate ones, but like I'm willing to say that Fitbit has gotten much better with that, but there are the knockoff brands that still do calorie expenditure. So the 90 actually makes a little bit more sense, because I've had clients like, I don't know what's going on. I burned 3,000 calories during my 15-minute walk. And I'm like, what?
Well,
what?
Wait, what?
That's not what you burn on a 15-minute walk, Dezi?
Like, damn.
I guess it depends on the technology. So the reason,
were they really walking, or were they trying to make a baby?
they were getting some.
Maybe they're just not being honest about the walking kind of thing that they were having. So.
Yeah, 100%. But that's what I'm saying though.
They were walking on water. Who knows?
What a guy!
What a guy!
But I'll say this though. I got on a phone call with, there's a company called Pinoy. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. But Pinoy makes
PNOE.
Pnoe. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, so they reached out to me about obviously some units that they were selling, because they sell basically VO2 max, like the actual indirect calorimetry kits, and then they actually kind of sell the full thing, but the ones that you can wear while you train. So it's like the ones that you have a little backpack, it has like a CO2 sensor, O2 sensor, it's everything. It's pretty cool. I mean, it's like it's a $7,000 like, you know, piece of equipment, but it's a lot more cheaper than the actually ones that they use in labs. So they made it more affordable for people to be able to, like gyms and places like that, to be able to get. Anyways, I didn't really kind of purchase it, but I asked for validation data, and actually they work directly with Whoop. And what they did is like they started looking into indirect calorimetry data points, which for people listening in, that's usually one of like the most accurate ways in which you can estimate, energy expenditure by calculating how much oxygen you take in and how much CO2 you expire, expire, right? Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
So
expend,
yeah. So essentially they compared data points with like what Whoop was kind of throwing in. And they literally were able to like, the margin of error was really small. There was small margin of error, but we're talking about like, 3 to 5%. So it was actually pretty interesting to kind of see that. It's unpublished data, but it's somewhere like you can actually see the actual study. I think if we go on Pinoy, or I think actually Whoop, they did a podcast on this, and they kind of like presented some of the information. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I also recently found out that, let's say, for example, you calculate your own calorie expenditure. Let's say you actually go to an indirect calorie, like a metabolic cart test assessment, and they do your actual resting metabolic rate. You can contact Whoop, and they can readjust your basal metabolic rate. So it's a little more accurate data that it actually kind of throws for you. So it's interesting. They do a pretty good job. I mean, dude, this company is making like bazillions, and
Andres, what's this called? PNOE? Is that what you said?
PNOE, yeah, PNOE.
Metabolic analysis.
Andres, I have a question for you, because you utilize this with your clients. I sometimes send Whoop to my clients, but I'm not big on calorie counting or macro tracking. I've been using it. I want to say my average calorie range is like 2,500 a day, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm looking at this data and I want to lose
expenditure still, right?
Calorie expenditure. Yes.
Okay.
So let's say I'm doing 2,500 calories a day. If I wanted to lose weight based on the Whoop, that means I'd have to be 2,000 or 2,200, depending on what my goals are, how much restriction diet is, correct? Mm-hmm. My question is, I'm hiring on another dietitian, and she was doing like a mock trial on me, and she went to the NIH website and said my energy expenditure was 3,300 calories. And I was like, there's no way I'm burning 3,300 calories.
Yep.
To my knowledge, like I think about it, and I'm not just using the Whoop as my one and only, but I also have like a calorie calculator that I use when I am calculating macros, and I've done it on myself, and I get around the 2,500. Saying if I do, so maybe 22, 23, depending on what my workout is, so on and so forth, right? So my question to you is, what do you use? How do you validate it? And then how do you bring the Whoop in on that? Because as you're saying, it's pretty accurate. And I would say 2,500 probably accurate for me. Yeah. I'm gonna leave it there. That's a lot to unpack.
No, it's true. Like I look at the information with like a critical eye, and it depends on the person too. So I have a client down in Bradenton. She's an MD actually, but she's just really trying to become a physique competitor, like, wellness, whatever. So we talked, and she's at a low weight, like 135 pounds or so, like that. She started off like a 140. So it's not like a whole weight to lose. And you look at her, she obviously looked pretty fit. So I got her to get the Whoop, and we started looking and evaluating some of the information, because she was like really stagnated on the weight, like not moving on nothing. And I started looking at her data, and she's like training, like doing Orange Theory fitness, a whole bunch of different things like this. And we realized actually that her calorie expenditure on the Whoop, like obviously looking across a month, was 1,800 calories, 1,700 calories. Right. So not as high as like, and I was having her like actually be consuming like 1,800 calories, because I thought, well, like she's a pretty active person, but she was not losing the weight. She was not losing the fat, and body composition was not really truly changing. So I use that information, and I was like, okay, like what if we just push it? I don't like doing this, but let's just kind of push it, and let's just bring down your calories just to see what happens. At 1,400 calories, it's going to suck, but obviously like, let's just kind of like test it out. And there was obviously a few variables, like she stopped doing Orange Theory Fitness, which I think it was just a little bit too stressful for her. And then I think it was kind of like laying some havoc in hormones. But great, like lo and behold, ever since we started doing that, she's in the past couple of months went from like 142, 141 to 135, right? So then, okay, like I'm looking at that information, it's like something clicked, right? So I think a lot of times, like in our nutrition world, particularly dietitians, we typically just use a lot of this, like, you know, calculation formulas and stuff. And sometimes like we are, like, in my opinion, sometimes we overestimate, particularly because we underestimate, or we just simply overestimate how active somebody is. The problem with a lot of these different things is like they're looking at, and some of these like validating formulas that we use to calculate obviously how much calories you require. They're going to be based on like thousands, like, you know, data points on that metabolic cart assessment that we just talked about earlier. But I honestly feel that it's a little bit on the higher side. So I prefer, what I like to do is I like to look at like, you know, the data that comes up from like a Whoop if somebody's wearing that, or just simply the data of that they collected of what they think they eat normally, and just adjust based on that, right? If I'm normally consuming on average, the problem is obviously outliers, depends on the person. Somebody's like completely out of whack. Like one day it's like they just consume like what they think is like 4,000 calories, and the other days I consume 2,000. Of course, that's just difficult for us to kind of establish that, because it's just so many outliers around how many like ups and downs that they're having. But some other people that they're pretty consistent, and I see, okay, like they're constantly like, I have a really good CrossFit client, like, you know, male, like pushing 2,700 calories, 2,600 calories. Realize obviously he's being stagnant in the plateauing in some of the weight. Body composition changes, so weight is not necessarily moving. So that obviously tells me that he's getting enough. But then realize that no, you know what, we maybe need to actually kind of drop things a little bit more if we really want to have more true fat loss in this process. So, and he actually wears the Halo, which is like one that Amazon came out, which has like no great reviews. Supposedly Halo now.
Halo?
It's called Amazon Halo.
Isn't
so it's
it
also
a droid?
It's a watch.
It's a droid feature, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but it does HRV. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, it does supposedly all kinds of stuff, but even measures, I don't know how in the hell he does it, but he measures body fat percentage. Like, I don't know the technology. That's where it gets very critical, or it gets very
that's
criticized.
where I'm like, what?
So I think it does.
You mean you guys don't have your clients measure body fat through their wrist?
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know the
Let
technology.
me see your wrist on the camera, please. Okay, you look like you lost body fat.
So
Oh, yeah,
I
you're
think
22.
it connects. I think it connects to it. You have to take a picture.
I mean, this is so serious. Like, he won't take a break about a joke, and he's just like, "No, you need to know what the Halo does. I don't know how it does body fat."
I actually do.
He's about business.
Yeah, so it's like the 3D technology. So like they just basically do it through like a picture, but it's connecting to the app of Amazon Halo, I guess. So
it still doesn't make sense to me.
Well, they did a study on it, supposedly. I mean, I'm just reading here.
Really?
Like 3D, like you set your phone up and you walk around your phone naked.
So
there is one that
progress pictures.
Smartphone camera based assessment of adiposity, a multi-site validation study. I had to read it. It doesn't look like it's been published yet. But it's worth like exploring. I'll send it to you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we could talk about maybe on the next Chit Chat.
Well, all right.
Kind of going back to this for the Whoop. So these calories, you're finding people that are in line and others that are out of line. Even going towards that, how long do you keep that person at what the Whoop is saying? And have you ever seen the Whoop adapt to people with the fat loss, that their calories start to go down as well?
No, because in my opinion, I feel like changes in metabolic rate, like they're not, because of the percentage that exists and or the percentage of the margin of error that exists, that when you really look at, like, you know, and I don't really know the data around this, but, you know, for example, when we gain 1 pound of muscle, how much does your calorie expenditure go up by? Like, I don't know that exact number. And I don't think there's an accurate number to kind of describe that, right? Because it's all based on indirect calorimetry at the moment. Yeah. So but I'm not going to think that, you know, if you add 1 pound of muscle, you're going to like increase like how many calories you burn on a daily basis by 300, right? Like, it's probably going to be something like, you know, like very small. And I don't think obviously it would be hard for us to be able to see. You can probably see trends though, right? Like if you kind of gain 10 pounds of muscle, or you gain 10 pounds over the past like few, because that was your goal as an athlete, and you start to see that your Whoop data starts to show a much bigger averages compared to what it was 6 months ago, then perhaps obviously that could be a reflection of that. But it's just, it's what I was just talking about. Somebody, one of my clients the other day, weight loss and body composition changes. There's so many freaking variables that it's just so hard to just pinpoint whatever that could be the case. This is just one out of like, I mean, we're talking about like I'm probably not let's say gonna hundreds, but it's gonna be closer to hundreds of variables, from, you know, hormones to stress to sleep to how much you move to like
That
how
late
much you
night,
fidget, like you're like how much you eat, like the accuracy of your eating, like the
what
how
you
consistently what you eat, how consistently you do that. Like, do you do this like day to day? Like, do you actually underestimate? I mean, there's so many different, you know, aspects that it's just so hard to control. So it's so difficult. And that's obviously what makes it frustrating for clients and for coaches to figure out exactly and get to the bottom of when you, for example, hit a plateau, right? Which is like, I'm still frustrated because I'm not seeing results and I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. But are you? Like, and you could be, and this is what I tell clients, I'm not saying that you're not, but there's also a possibility that maybe you are just not seeing it, right? So we start to check out boxes. Okay, let's figure out, like, let's just figure this out. Like what happened this weekend? Oh, well, okay, maybe there was not as an accuracy this weekend. And I'm telling you this because I see that shit myself. Like to be like as accurate in that kind of little test that I did, I dropped like 4 pounds, like, you know, throughout, like, you know, a course of like, you know, 1 month. But I knew exactly what the variables I changed differently for what I typically do. I added 3 Peloton rides in the morning, which is like 3 extra like workout sessions, 20 to 40 minutes. And then I was like on point with my macros through the weekend, right? I was still eating out and stuff, but I was still making sure that I kind of measure all that. So I was on top of it, and I obviously saw the changes. But a lot of times, like, I mean, this is me after like 10 years of like learning and coaching and all doing all different things like that I know what the typical things are going to happen. But then now, like when I went on vacation last week that I went to like, I can't really pinpoint whatever it is the case. I just know for me to maintain myself, it's easy because I've built the habits around this. So I think when we start to evaluate some of this data and people kind of get excited about it and they're like, oh my God, now I know how many calories I need to be consuming. That's information. That's like, you know, calorie awareness for you, and maybe helpful. And it also depends on the personality of the person too. Amen. Right? Like you guys know me, you guys know I'm a huge nerd on numbers and I want to kind of like dig into the science and Marvel. So I want to dig into the science and all that kind of stuff like that. So to me, it's kind of cool to be able to see that. And I have clients that are like that, just in the same token as I have clients that absolutely hate that and despise that. Right. So
I hate this.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, because a couple episodes ago we had talked about like being in your body. We talked about Simone Biles. And I guess my question for you all is, the two of you have different coaching styles. So how do you take someone from, all right, so if there are metrics that you're looking at, there are things that you're finding affirmation through, into getting to a point where they're trusting their body? Because I think that we all have 10 plus years in this game of seeing what didn't work for ourselves, seeing what does work, seeing what works for others, and then finally getting to a point where you're like, you know what, I trust my body. Right. So like, how do we get clients from, all right, cool, like let's educate you, into let's allow you to trust yourself and understand that this is a long game. So like, how do you guys approach that?
I think going back to what Andres is saying, like data-driven, instead of data-driven, well, I guess you could say data-driven results, data-driven habits, right? Like what habits can we learn from the data we're getting? So like I send my 100%. Clients to Whoop, and some of them, and most of them that use the Whoop don't count calories. But what they do is they look at their sleep. And what they notice that when they get better sleep, they perform better. When they get better sleep, they make better choices. So how it's like, especially like in nutrition, right? Especially working with us, they want something that they can hold and get results with. And when you show them that they're doing these things consistently, it's leading them to the results. It's kind of that reflection stage. So I think allowing them to reflect on what's been working well with that data is what helps push them to make those habits. Because we always see like, you guys know, I do the plate method, right? I teach my clients about the plates, and it goes 2 months in, and at that 2 month mark, I don't know about you guys, but they they tend to like, oh my God, what's happened? What have I been doing? And it's like, look at everything we've changed. Your hydration, your nutrition, your sleep, your performance gotten better. And all these things add up. But at that 2-month mark, it's like their body tells them, turn around, let's reverse. What are we doing here? But it's data-driven habits that we're really trying to create at the end of the day. Because if someone likes to macro track, so for example, Andres, that's his personality. He does it really well. He does it really well with his clients. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just what he likes. Just like I've had clients that really like that, and there's clients that don't like it, just like Andres said. So it's how do we make those things into habits? And that's how you make it long-term. Because just because I'm mindful on how 100%. I eat, that's what I teach, I still use the Whoop because it gives me some data that I can use, but I don't live and breathe off of it.
So I think I agree with all that, and I think just to add to this, and the way I learned this from a mentor, a business mentor that he kind of teaches us a lot, which is like, what is your scoreboard? What's like what is it that you're using to define? First of all, you define what are the outcomes that you want, and he calls it like OTA, or outcomes, transparency, accountability. And using a scoreboard to measure and track those things. So outcomes is where you want to achieve and what you want to achieve, right? So like if it's like a specific weight goal, then obviously it's trying to understand, okay, how do you want to measure the success around that goal? Is it going to be just the weight? And this is obviously where coaching comes in. And it's like, okay, like perhaps it's not just the most best way to do so if you just simply kind of base all your progress on just the number because of all the kind of changes. So perhaps the outcomes is like, why do you want to lose weight? Because of the feeling it's going to give you, because of the confidence, because of the ability to be able to do certain things, to play with your kids, to train and lift heavy weight. So then we define what that scoreboard is going to be. So if the outcome is going to be this, okay, how are we measuring that success? So if the success is being measured by, hey, I want to be able to kind of fit better into my clothing. Okay, then obviously the scoreboard is going to be measured on clothing size. I also want to feel like I want to be like, I'm just tired of feeling tired. I hear that shit all the time. So, okay, so we're going to measure like the scoreboard here is going to be on how you feel, right? Like I want to be able to lift heavier weights. Okay, the outcome is going to be on your 1 rep maxes and obviously how much weight that you're lifting. So you define what those things are going to be. And then you simply like, the transparent accountability is being true to yourself, that those are the things that you're going to not only going to be being accountable to really try to pursue and try to measure, but at the same time that you're also being true to yourself, that it's exactly what like it's going to be what you're going to be focusing on. So I think depending on like, how do you, and I think the original question was, how do you get somebody to turn this into a sustainable kind of lifestyle? It's repetition, but also help them and understand too, that those outcomes and that scoreboard can't change. It doesn't have to be all the same. In business, for example, for us is like an outcome can change from a specific revenue target that we have to a specific number of clients that we want to serve, like all different things like that. That may change in this quarter, that may change next year, right? And then the scoreboard could be different. Maybe perhaps we're measuring the success of our coaches when we grow, or perhaps it's measuring simply, how much revenue we can generate, right? So the same thing is like in your weight loss journey. It's really trying to understand like what is it that you're using to measure success. And that's really when he talked about that scoreboard analogy, it was really a good way to be able to kind of understand it.
Yeah. I mean, I really love both of those things because I find an enmeshment between the two. And I think it's really hard. And we've all experienced this with the clients that we've had, right? It's really hard to help them understand that like life doesn't get better magically because you're a certain weight. Like I'm sorry. Like it's I'm gonna say it, hot take today. Like it just doesn't. It doesn't, because you have to look at your habits and you have to look at your fulfillment. You have to look, and Andres, I love what you said, like those OTA scoreboards, like it's subject to change. That's what this is, right? So
I think I posted just to literally to that point, and I posted this tweet the other day, and I posted on Instagram, which is, so confidence doesn't come from losing 20 pounds. It comes from the person you become after smartly going through that journey, right?
100%.
And that's
Andres Ayesa, Michael Scott.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's like, you're about to pull like the office.
Maybe I shouldn't.
You should, yeah.
You still need to watch that episode.
Put it in there.
He just wouldn't laugh. It's a Venezuelan thing, man. When Venezuelans come, they don't get American
They
comedy.
don't.
One of my
Well,
buddies is
Roxy-
like, I hate everybody
Roxy's
loves
Venezuelan,
Raymond.
and she literally just, we were talking about a quote
Let's
this
fight.
morning. Well, Roxy this morning, she's Venezuelan, and she literally kind of like read a quote, and she's like, "Oh, you should say it like this," and just kind of put Michael Scott underneath. And I was like, "Oh, you're an Office fan. I know about this, not because I watch it, but because I have a couple of dudes that obviously gave me a lot of shit because I didn't know exactly what the reference was."
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, that's definitely kind of like a thing. But going back to metrics and going back to wearable technology, we live in a world now that those things are available, so we can use them to help you create. Like, the key word here is awareness. It's understanding like what's happening. So I'm gonna give you the best example and something I have been doing lately, which, by the way, you've never done this before. I highly recommend you find a place to do it. Have you guys ever heard of Nordic saunas?
Yes, I
saw
actually
you
wanted
do
to
it.
ask you about that. Yeah.
I posted about it.
saw
I
you,
think you probably saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw it. Because the other thing I saw that you posted your Whoop data when you did contrast, and I remember working in baseball, like that was part of my recovery, and that's like
Doing
when I
what?
felt my best. Didn't you do contrast? You did some hot
Hot and
tub,
cold.
and then you got
Well,
hot
that's
and
what
cold.
Nordic sauna is. So
Okay.
it's so well, that's like the, I didn't know it's called.
I'm laughing
contrast.
because he's like saying it's contrast, and you're just like, yeah, dude, Nordic sauna. You don't know Nordic sauna?
Maybe I
Get in the game,
thought
Dezi.
Nordic sauna was a cryotherapy. Maybe that's what I was assuming.
No, it's both.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
honestly, I've no clue.
You did it once. All right. Okay.
I did it
expert, go.
twice. I did it twice. But obviously the cool thing about it is, like, you know, there's like an instructor through the whole process, so that you're doing kind of like breath work and stuff. So it's not just like unguided. So supposedly what they said is, like, you know, in Nordic countries is a pretty common thing that they do, in which like they get exposed to very hot, you know, or very, like, you know, high like heat environments, like usually through a sauna, usually through hot stones, or like hot like things like that's usually kind of like the way that they do it, up to the upwards of like 140 to 170 degrees, like crazy. And
Sauna.
they immediately get exposed to very cold. Now, in Nordic countries, you don't have to actually fill up a tub with ice. You have lakes and different places like that where you can just jump in, or you can just jump into the snow. And actually, it's funny that my dad used to live in Sweden when he was like younger, and he told me that this is something that they would do. Like, they would just literally jump in like a swimsuit in like the snow, and they would just kind of like lay in there, right? So it's like really cold exposure. So supposedly, from what they said, and again, I don't know like the whole research and everything like that, that there is like actually this like things like called hot what's it called?
Heat
Like
shock proteins.
Heat shock proteins. I was like hot shock proteins.
Gotcha.
Heat shock proteins, but apparently
Te
there's
tengo
ones that
hermano,
also
I
there's
got you,
also
brother.
there's also some ones that actually get activated you know, when it comes down to, like, you know, I don't know what they're called, but then it's something like called, you know, shock proteins or something. So, but it's supposedly that they kind of have this myriad of kind of benefits, and again, I don't know the science behind it, so, and I haven't had the time to be able to kind of research into this, but I've heard about it. I've heard of, like, obviously this is a thing. But what I noticed from doing these things in my tract, in my tracking, in my Whoop and those different things, is that my recovery was significantly more elevated and the days afterwards. And I'll give you obviously the other kind of hint in here too, that or the other kind of thing that we did. So we went to Georgia. We kind of stopped by, there was like a little river on the side, and, you know, rivers typically have, like, you know, water kind of a very temperature control at, like, you know, 50 to 52 degrees or something like that. And we jumped on it, and we would just kind of like stay there, like probably like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon or so, like that, for maybe like 20 minutes, like 10 minutes. Jump off to it. The next morning, my recovery was through the roof. So I think it's and recovery, just so you guys understand, and the way that Whoop typically measures it, it's a combination of variables. They're looking at heart rate variability, which is kind of like a measure between, I think the way I explain it to people is like, have you guys ever seen an AKG, like, you know, which is like the little, when somebody gets plugged into like a heart rate monitor, and they kind of like see the little spikes, like, you know, up and down. So the distance between the peaks of those like little things that you see in an AKG, it's like the distance that exists between them, and then over like a specific period of time defines what you call your heart rate variability. And supposedly that is a measure of how your kind of body status. because you have two different kinds of systems in your body. You have your sympathetic and your parasympathetic. Sympathetic is more like the one that kind of activates things, like increases your heart rate, increases kind of sweat rate, increases all these different, metabolism. Yeah. And then you have your parasympathetic, which does the complete opposite. It lowers your heart rate. It kind of like calms you down. It's like trying to get you to recover and stuff like that. And the human body needs to have a good balance between those two things. Because if you have a very overactive sympathetic system, which is in times of stress, times of a lot of like, poor recovery and stuff like that, then, and that's normal. It typically happens sometimes when your body needs to kind of like work a little extra to kind of like, mitigate any kind of damage or anything going on. So that's really what this heart rate variability kind of gives you. So Whoop algorithms, they basically look into heart rate variability. They look at your sleep. That you could now into your, like, some of the sensors can also kind of like look, because of like the little light that they emit, that they can look at oxygen saturation, not oxygen saturation, but just respiratory rate, which is another thing too. So respiratory rate, like, resting heart rate, like your average heart rate, all the different things like that. And they kind of come up with a measure in percentages on recovery markers. So when you do all these different kinds of things and treatments in different kinds of areas, it's a really good, really indicator on like on what you can do to actually get your body to recover faster and to actually be, I mean, we've all worked with athletes. I mean, what's like a big thing that has been kind of been done for like years? Cold tubs, right? Like it happens all the time. So it's usually as a way to reduce inflammation and manage recovery and all the different things like that. So that was really interesting. And why would this be important for anybody trying to lose weight or trying to kind of improve? Because when your body's actually recovered, when your body is, operating optimally, it can change. Otherwise, it just doesn't like to. Like the way I explain it to people is like, if your body is overly stressed, chronically stressed, like, under, it's sleep
not
deprived.
sleeping.
Yeah. It's like, it's kind of like trying to tell you like, hey, like right now we're not primed for us to make any changes right now. We need to make sure that we get back to baseline before we can do anything. So get your shit together, give me a sleep, give me, manage your stress and control of your tantrums and all that kind of stuff like that, because we're trying to actually kind of make a living here and we're trying to kind of keep you alive here. So like, that's literally what I think the way I think, if your body's like, internal systems can talk, that's exactly what they would say. But then people just kind of blame it on other kinds of areas and they don't understand exactly what kind of impact these things can have.
It's really hard to blame other things rather than take the ownership behind what you're doing. I'm finding that that's a really hard thing. And most of the time it's helping people to like release that shame and say like, hey, if you want me to help you, you got to help yourself by taking some ownership. Like, just like you said, Andres, like get your shit together, go to bed at 10, try it, turn the TV off. I get it. Cool. You watch The Office before bed. All right, cool. You can do it another time. Like, is The Office more important than the outcome that you desire? Like, I don't know what else to say to you. It's hard for people to take ownership, and and I'm someone who doesn't do that perfectly too. It's just hard.
That's exactly right. We're human. We make the same kind of mistakes. And I mean, like I preach like going to bed at an earlier time. I don't go to bed always at an earlier time. That
I
way
know. I watch your Whoop, unlike Dezy's.
Yeah.
All right. You know what?
I'm not obsessed
to bring
about
a spring circle.
So the thing about too though is like, I'm not obsessed about other people's like kind of recoveries unless they're my clients.
I'm obsessed with you, bro, because we are doing a challenge where you're gonna fast for a week and I'm not, and we're gonna do a CrossFit competition. We've been waiting for this.
When is this happening? Because
he's scared. I told you, bro. I'm ready. Let's go.
That actually might be a good reason to fly back.
I eat breakfast now, so I'm actually going backwards.
Ooh.
Yeah. He's going the right way. He's not going backwards. He's going forwards. Okay.
Hey, you were so confident about Andres. You're gonna have to do this, right? To make sure that we find balance in the world.
I am 100% confident.
You said that you would do this. All right. Well, then when's this happening?
Well, Tony moved, so.
I'll come back to Tampa, bro. I'll get.
Well, how far are you from Tampa?
Like literally, like the other day, like Tony called me on my birthday, and he was just all covered on like like he had like a mask on, and he was at home, and he had like he has his glasses, and he looked like a freaking robot. And I'm like, what's going on, dude? It's like, we're just in Tennessee. And I was like, oh, what you doing? Like, I'm expecting maybe like a family trip or more like something related to business and stuff like that. Fantasy football, bro. I'm like, what? Isn't that something that you do online? Like you just put your stuff. And
I've seen those. I've seen those glasses.
And I'm like, it perfectly fit the entire kind of like, conversation. Is like, yeah, this guy,
health.
He went to just do a fantasy football thing in Tennessee. So I was like, that's interesting. Yeah.
Dude, this is fitting because Chibi asked us for new pictures, and he sent her one with his freaking goggles, and I was like, yo, you look like you just slayed some 70-year-olds in pickleball right now.
Yeah,
all about the biohacking, man. We need to go back to that episode, dude.
Oh man.
Tony Greenfield.
Tony Greenfield. Yeah.
Castillo.
Well, speaking of Wim Hof, speaking of like,
I'm speaking of Wim Castillo. He's the new biohacker on the scene.
He's the Dominican new guy.
Biohacking, bro.
Hey.
Fritura para todo el mundo.
I get it, but talking about like the imposter here, like, his name is Wim Hof. To you, Tony. So I don't know if you guys ever seen him, or people listening to this, but like he's the guy he's been like, featured like a bunch of different magazines. He's been world famous because of the extreme conditions he's put his body through, and in conditions that some people would consider like, like you would die. Like if you go through that from, I think one time he just kind of like hiked like, some sort of like very cold environment, like, minus freaking like, degrees. I don't even know exactly what the details are. And he just did it in his shorts and some boots. I don't know if he was actually kind of wearing any kind of like footwear. And then he also did something in the desert, like, no hydration, like, doing like a full marathon, like 100+ degrees or whatever is the case, without drinking any kind of water. And he's done multiple things. And he teaches now concepts of breath work. And one of the things that they did in this whole Nordic sauna thing is you go through the process, because I actually didn't talk about exactly what it is, but the Nordic sauna process is you go in like 10 to 12 minutes and 140 to 170 degrees. It's brutal. Like it's very hard. Like you're literally looking at the clock and you're like, when is this going to be over? But they have a guy that is kind of walking through that. And one of the things that he does is breath work. And some of the breath work techniques that this guy taught and here in Temple, the place that I go, is from Wim Hof. And some of this like kind of like breath work include things such as, for example, like diaphragmatic breathing, which is actually using your stomach instead of your rib cage to be able to kind of breathe, which is actually the way that we should technically be breathing, but we don't always do it. And a lot of times when that happens is like when you're using your rib cage, you create so much tension around your back and stuff like that, and then we're sitting down most of the day. So we don't know how to breathe. That's just essentially the way that they explain it. So that's kind of like part of it too, but you mentioned Wim Hof, and they do a lot of techniques with that. And then when I went on a spiritual retreat that I went to my friend Carol in Miami, she did the same thing. So it's a pretty predominant thing it's been done now. And the same sort of breath work was applied after you do 12 minutes of the Nordic sauna, or like the actual sauna, like super like high heat. You go directly into a cold tub. And the cold tub is like, ice everywhere. And you are there, like I was not able to hold on in there for more than 6 minutes. And then you repeat that 4 times. So
you did
like 6 minutes.
Shit. I have a hard time with 45
well
seconds.
And the thing is like, you have to literally, like I had to put my feet up because like it really hurts in specific, like your extremities and different things like that. So
everything shrinks, right?
Everything shrinks. Yes, that's correct. This goes on YouTube.
Like skin tightness is what I'm trying to say.
Remember what happened a few months ago? Whenever you talk, you kind of use certain kinds of words.
This
and
is Tony. This is why
reaching out to me.
What do you mean? I'm talking about like your skin getting tight, and
this is why we're not on here multiple times a month, Tony, because of you.
What did I say?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Anywho, all right. So I've been actually really interested in this because I did a joint live with the breath coach. And I've just been so fascinated with the breath after listening to him, because I had already done some of the Wim Hof breathing. So I started a new app. It's called Breathwork, WRK. And the way that I explain this to my clients and having them do it too, is it's kind of like Headspace. So they take you through like just basic education of breath work. And then they have one for like anxiety, energizing. And like, that's what made me fall in love with Headspace. Cause I was like, all right, if I'm doing this for a certain goal, then I can do it. Now I'm at a point 5 years later in my meditation where I can just go out and do it on my own. And it's really great, but it's been an evolution. So check this app out. I'm actually such a huge fan. Because cool. Just for that reason, it kind of like helps you to see an evolution in your breath work. And it's so funny too, because like we oftentimes learn that CO2 is such a bad thing, but they're trying to teach you how to increase that, which is crazy to think about, right?
So cool that you mentioned that. So like, so they did the same place. This is a yoga studio. They did this. There's a test that you can do to actually understand your capacity. And the way that they had us do this, which is really cool. And there's actually a website that you can kind of put in there, like your numbers, and they can kind of tell you exactly your capacity. So essentially they do is like you take a few deep breaths and everything. And then you take like this massive deep breath. And then you start to release like your basically you start to expire as slow as possible. And you start to count how many seconds can you actually be releasing air. And I think it's something related to CO2 capacity. And I don't know the science. Actually, I need to kind of bring in this guy into the, that's a really good place. Like, yeah, he's local, but he talks about this all the time. So it's like, if you can release your breath for more than 40 to 50 seconds or so, then you are obviously at a higher capacity of CO2 something, and all these different things kind of happen. So it was really cool because everybody's just like doing that in a very small manner, and they actually call it the humblebee method, because like the bumblebee, not the humblebee, the bumblebee, because really, and it's gonna sound crazy because this is in an entire room. So imagine they take a deep breath, and then what you do is like you actually make the sound of a bee, just like this, and that's the way that you're actually kind of releasing all your breath. So that's a good way until you cannot make a sound. That's obviously the end of it, right? So for people listening to this, like if you want to do a quick exercise, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if I can bring in Mitch into his name is Mitch into the podcast, and he can explain this entire process.
Better be a Chit Chat series.
And I can do that, and bring him on into the podcast, and he can explain this. But usually you're gonna have a specific amount of seconds you can do this. Some people can't do it more than 18 seconds or 15 seconds. Some people can literally go up to like an entire minute. But it was really interesting to kind of understand this concept because of what you just said, literally like CO2 capacity, all kinds of stuff like that. So
Dezi's doing it. We should mess it up. Laugh. Say, oh, sorry, you messed it up.
Yeah, we just messed it up.
You just messed me up, dude.
He was
dude. There's another one. There's another one too, that like if you take a sip of oxygen through a straw, right? So like you take a small one and then you like go do something active, and those are your breaths. Like if you want to initiate panic within yourself, like you do that, but it's increasing your CO2 capacity. Dude, this stuff is so
it's fascinating.
All right. So if you don't have him on, there's another guy, Campbell, breathwork coach from Australia. I just love hearing him talk, man. His accent's amazing. I mean, to be honest, so much great stuff, man.
There's breathwork coaches that charge like a lot of money for this. And honestly, like, you know, right now it's not a priority for me, but I would pay it because it's so.
But that's what I'm saying.
Like,
we're trying to take people from the sympathetic at all times and a little bit of the parasympathetic, man, a bit more balanced, because most people are in a constant state of fight or flight. Like it's nuts right now. So it's such a great topic, man. I love talking about it. It's
dude,
one of my new hobbies.
You, Tony, not only you were looking great today, Tony, but at the same time you came up with a great topic for us to kind of like cover.
You're welcome. I bring my best, and I try my best at every one of these podcasts because we want to provide the most value to those listening.
Good. That sounded pretty genuine.
It was. Why does no one believe me?
Because sometimes there's a lot of sarcasm.
I'm gonna call bullshit.
That's because you have a shrinking mind, Dezi. Expand it. Let's move forward from this topic, not backwards. Eat your breakfast, folks.
Too much cold exposure.
Yes. You know, when he's about to make some sort of comment, he has this freaking smirk. I can see it when it's like registering in his mind, and he's just waiting for a moment to throw something out. NSFW, not safe for work.
Oh, well, well, it's the top of the hour, boys. So we're gonna close it up here. Hopefully our listeners actually got a laugh out of this and really kind of enjoyed the little sciencey nerdy conversation. But if you did enjoy it, make sure that you kind of leave us a comment. Make sure you take a bit of a screenshot right now in your podcast and kind of share with us and tag us at Tony Castillo and at Dezi Abeyta. No, it's at Coach Tony Castillo. Correction.
Underscore.
Dezi Abeyta, and then at Andres Ayesta on Instagram. And we'll love to kind of give you a shout out and say hello. So, boys, thank you so much for your time. And for people listening in, we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have a good day.